On this episode of Tell Us a Story.
You can find out more about me at my website, miajhanks.com. And there's also a link on that website to purchase my book. So after I got out of this marriage and I went through a lot of therapy, did some healing, and I decided I would try my hand at writing.
Can you talk about living with a narcissist?
So a covert narcissist is a little bit different than an overt narcissist. Narcissists don't get better with age, they get worse. They must be the best husband, the best father. But behind closed doors, they're anything but. They're controlling.
Welcome to Tell Us a Story, the podcast by Belmont City Press, where entrepreneurs and sales professionals share their journeys, insights, and strategies for success. In each episode, our guests reveal how they've overcome challenges, established their brands, and leveraged their stories to promote their businesses so you can too. I'm Red Hilton, your host for this episode. Today I'm joined by Mia Hanks, who is the author of Bridemaid, a memoir. So, Mia, tell us a story.
Okay, well, I am Mia Hanks, and like you said, I'm the author of the book Bridemaid, a Memoir. And with my book, I'm hoping that I'll be able to help victims of narcissistic abuse find their voices, specifically with navigating their way out of this abuse cycle. And basically, I'm passionate about reaching people who are currently in these abusive relationships and who are wanting to escape from them and find peace and ultimately find themselves. And I'll go ahead and throw this out there. You can find out more about me at my website, miajhanks.com. And there's also a link on that website to purchase my book.
Excellent. And we'll put a link to your website in the show notes. So if you could speak maybe a little bit on your story and how the memoir came to be.
So I was married to a covert narcissist for 29 years. And it was quite a journey. It took a long time to realize that I was actually a victim of abuse. Narcissism is a very insidious form of abuse, and sometimes you don't realize you're in it until you're really in it. But with respect to how my book came about, when I was leaving, I was seeking out a lot of information, trying to find everything I could to read about narcissism and learn about what had happened. And everything I found was either written by a therapist or a psychologist. Great information, but it was all very academic. What I was hoping to find were some firsthand accounts, somebody who had lived this, that could speak about it from an insider point of view. And I couldn't really find much out there along those lines. So after I got out of this marriage and I went through a lot of therapy, did some healing, and I decided I would try my hand at writing. I had never written before, but I really felt like a memoir would be something that might be helpful to people out there who are experiencing this same type of abuse. And I know there are lots of people that are living this life. So I wanted to offer that firsthand insider view of what it's like to live day to day with a narcissist. And that is kind of how the book came to be.
Can you talk about living with a narcissist? What were your experiences when someone's reading the book? What is it you're going to share?
So what I did was I set the book up as a series of short stories. It's a very easy read. And I just go chronologically all the way from meeting my now ex-husband through our whole 29-year marriage, all the way culminating into the divorce. And I start off, talking about the love bombing that narcissists will do and just how things slowly erode over time. I share very mundane day-to-day examples of, just how they lack empathy, how they cannot self-reflect or see things from other people's perspectives, all the way through, some more dramatic events. So yeah, it's definitely a journey, and like I said in the beginning, it takes a long time to figure out what you're actually experiencing. You're gaslit for so long that you are questioning your own ability to figure things out. So yeah, I just try to go through the book chronologically, talking about sort of each phase of life with a narcissist.
You use the word covert, and you then use the words, mundane, everyday life. Can you give some examples so that if someone sees themselves in you in your story, maybe a light bulb will go off for them?
Yeah, so a covert narcissist is a little bit different than an overt narcissist. They tend to the outside world, they are humble, they're kind, they're anything but a narcissist. And everyone on the outside thinks they are fantastic. They must be the best husband, the best father. But behind closed doors, they're anything but. They're controlling, they're manipulating. And as far as, examples, it's just that goes back to that lack of empathy. These are people that they really aren't looking out for your best interest. At their core, they really don't care how you feel or how you think. It's more about how they feel. And so I think things to look out for if you think you might be in a relationship with this type of person is, are they empathetic, and is their empathy genuine? Because narcissists can fake empathy, but is it genuine? For example, I talk about in my book, anytime I was sick, it was never, oh, can I help you? I'm sorry you're feeling bad. What can I do? Instead, my ex-husband's response to me being sick or injured would be to be angry, because it wasn't serving him. It was inconveniencing him. So that's definitely something to look out for, is just, is this person really empathetic, or are they faking empathy to get attention?
Mm-hmm. So once you started to realize that you were in a relationship married to a narcissist, how did you know to take steps, or what steps did you take? And what could
Um,
someone else possibly model?
I didn't know. I knew something was off, but for many years I ignored it. I think we all want to pretend that, or we all have a desire to be quote unquote normal,
Mm.
and live a normal life, and want everybody to think that we're living a normal life. So I knew for many years something wasn't right, but I just chose to sweep it under the rug. When I finally came to the realization that I needed to do something was probably about 27 years into my marriage.
Wow.
Narcissists don't get better with age, they get worse.
Mm-hmm.
So every year was a little bit worse, a little more controlling, and it really culminated into, by about year 27, I was so miserable. I just did not know if I could, I just didn't know if I could keep going. And then it was interesting. I was just scrolling through social media one night, and I think I was on Instagram, and I read a quote, and it really stuck with me. And the quote was about true intimacy. And it was something to the effect that true intimacy is not necessarily physical. Instead, it's being able to look at your partner and say, I feel safe with you.
Mm.
And that really resonated with me. And I thought, I should ask myself that question, do I feel safe? And the answer I came up with was no. No, I've never felt safe with this person.
Mm.
And that really prompted me to start doing some research and figuring out, is this a what they call a toxic relationship? What is a toxic relationship? I mean, I really didn't know the answers to these questions. And I literally just, I got on Google and I started researching this stuff. And it didn't take long for the pieces to all fall into place.
What was that moment where you said, not one day more?
I think when I realized that this was an actual textbook, Covert Narcissist, and everything I was reading basically said, this is a dangerous situation. You got to get out. And literally, I was taking these online quizzes, is my spouse a narcissist? And all of this. And every one of these little quizzes I was taking was coming back like, severe narcissism, um, you know, uh, run, don't walk. And I just realized wow, this is real. And yeah, I decided, for the first thing I did was seek out a therapist. And the therapist was a kind of an expert, so to speak, in narcissism. And she told me, You have to get out. You have to get out." So I was really looking for validation. I needed someone to give me permission, I
Mm.
felt. I needed somebody to tell me I needed to leave.
Mm. Talk to us about the steps you took in what the process or what the divorcing of a narcissist looks like. I'm assuming it is a scary, and I think divorce always is sort of confusing, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
emotion and, feelings of guilt. What was yours like? What are
Yes.
steps that you think someone should take in the divorce process from a narcissist?
I think looking back, I kind of did everything wrong. And it was just because I didn't know. I was still sort of under this belief that he really was a good person. I told myself he's going to be fair during this divorce. It's all gonna, this is going to be amicable. And I was just lying to myself, but I wanted to think that's how it would be. It is not. So I did not really take those necessary steps that I should have taken. And the biggest thing I would tell people is you need to secure some money.
Mm.
It costs money to leave. That's
Hmm.
the bottom line. And I never dreamt in a million years that my ex-husband would drain the bank accounts and try to basically choke me out with not having funds to live on.
Hmm.
But that's exactly what he did. So even if you think he'll never do that, when a narcissist knows you have left, it's game on.
Hmm.
They go from begging you to stay to literally hoping you end up homeless. It is one extreme to the other. So I would tell somebody, don't fool yourself. You need to make plans to leave. You don't just leave. You need preparation. And I one tip I give in my book is, and it sounds super simple, but it will make a difference. Every time you go to the grocery store, get some cash back. Start amassing a little bit of cash. You're gonna need money to get out, and that's just unfortunately the way it is. So many women who are victims of narcissistic abuse are financially abused, and so yeah, it does financially. It takes some planning to leave these people.
100%. I mean, a divorce in the best of circumstances is expensive,
Right.
but yes, dealing with the narcissist, I would suggest that you really didn't realize how much of a narcissist he was until, you
I
know.
didn't. I didn't. In fact, the therapist that I was seeing, after I had told her, through a few sessions, kind of what life had been like for 29 years, I asked her, I said, are you sure he's a narcissist? And she said, yes. And I said, well, I know that narcissism is a spectrum disorder. I said, where do you think he would fall? Now, she's never met him, but, she kind of heard enough. And I said, where would he fall? And she said, honestly, probably about the top 2%.
I mean, I
Um,
would have used the word off. He would fall off the chart.
off.
Off.
Off. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The extreme end of narcissism is sociopath.
Hmm.
And then beyond sociopath is psychopath.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I think I didn't realize, but he was a lot worse than I thought. I think sometimes it takes you actually telling someone your story, and then you realize, wow, that's actually worse than I thought. Because when you're telling somebody, it comes out a lot more real than what you tell yourself. So I
Well,
think it's important to talk.
right. When you're telling yourself something or thinking something through, you don't always complete your sentences. But when you're
Correct.
speaking to someone else and saying something, you have to close that loop or you have to explain, and you're going to use complete sentences and tell the entire story because that's what they need to understand it. So if you're just telling
Yeah.
yourself, you never have to continue, you don't ever have to close the loop and finish the sentence.
That's my experience exactly. You just want to make everything be okay. And I'm the type of person I don't like confrontation. I'll run from confrontation, which makes me a target for a narcissist. And so, yeah, it's easier to just kind of smooth it over and hope tomorrow's better. And you just kind of, tuck that away in the back of your mind and you move on.
Hmm.
And I think, in my generation, I think we're all kind of conditioned to believe that when you get married, you stick it out. You work on your marriage. You don't give up. And certainly when there's kids involved, you stay for the kids. You don't break up your family. But when there's abuse involved, this is not the best advice. So that's another big thing I would want to tell people out there. If you're out there saying, well, I'm going to stay for my kids, I don't want my kids to be children of divorce, that's not a good reason.
Well, no, I mean,
It
your
really is
children
not.
being children of divorce is better than your children being children of abuse.
Absolutely. And just, my kids did not get to witness what a healthy marriage looked like. And so I deprived them of being able to see what a healthy relationship was. So yeah, I mean, in retrospect, absolutely, they would have been better off had I done this 15 years ago. But hindsight is 2020. So
Hmm. How did you start your healing journey?
I found a therapist, and I quite literally went to weekly therapy for a year. And that was very, very helpful. But I'll tell you, just as helpful as that is just having a couple of people that you can talk to, whether it be family, whether it be friends, because talking to people, I don't know, I felt more validated, and it felt very therapeutic to discuss, all of this and kind of get it out in the open and feel like I wasn't trying to hide behind it anymore. So healing for me, definitely talking to friends and family, and finding a good therapist.
What will your book validate in someone else?
I hope it will be able to help people see if they suspect that they're in a toxic relationship. I hope they can read it and say, yeah, that sounds like what I'm going through. And then I hope it will give them some validation, and realize it's probably worse than you are admitting to yourself. And I hope people will feel like they have permission to get out of these relationships.
You mentioned lack of empathy. What are some other red flags people should be looking out for?
Just mainly paying attention to how that person makes you feel about yourself.
Hmm.
If you feel incompetent, if you feel like you can't make it without them, these narcissists want you to be completely dependent on them. So, if you just feel incompetent, if you feel like you could never manage on your own, these are things that the narcissist is making you feel about yourself.
Hmm.
So, definitely pay attention to that. And also, um, pay attention to how they treat other people, behind their backs, and just how if they are actually able to see things from other people's perspectives, and really just that lack of empathy. That's huge. It really is huge.
Do you think this is a neurological problem, or you think it's a behavioral problem? Do you think it's nature or nurture or both?
I think it's 100% nurture.
Nurture.
Um, One thing that people with narcissistic personality disorder have in common, there is a common thread in these people, and it all goes back to um, being neglected as a child, not
Hmm.
necessarily physical neglect, but emotional neglect. And that perfectly describes my ex-husband. He came from a good family. Not that there was anything wrong with his family at all, but this was a family that was very surface level. They did not delve very deep in their relationships. I hate to use the word cold, but they were a little bit on the cold side. You couldn't really get to know anyone in his family. It was just very surface level. And so I firmly believe that his emotional needs as a child were not met. And this is what happens to some of these people. They develop this narcissism as a means of protecting themselves from being hurt. So it all fits. I totally see why he is the way he is.
Well, he's
Um,
angry.
He's angry.
Yeah.
Right.
And anger is a secondary emotion, and,
exactly,
that sense of
and
abandonment.
he is broken from that, not being able to feel like those emotional needs were met. But on the flip side, that does not give these people permission to traumatize somebody else. So unfortunately, those that go on to develop narcissism, they end up hurting other people.
They have no accountability.
None
Right.
whatsoever.
That's what's enraging, I think, to the rest of us who are on the other side of it. I do want to give you a little bit of pushback, and I don't like to play semantics, but when you refer to his family as a good family and then go on to describe how they're cold and he didn't get the nurturing he needs, I don't know if I would use a good family. I would say they aren't bad, but to me, a good family is somebody who sees to the needs of others, within that family unit. So I think that you're sort of giving that definition of societal good family. In all appearances, it looks as though, and I think that feeds into the narcissism as well, because nobody believes, this person didn't have what they needed, and therefore they don't get, the attention they need, or it's not addressed. Some teacher might say, oh, they have a good parents, they have good family, they have a good, whatever it happens to be. There's no reason for him to be like this, not realizing, a good family is, to me at least, make sure that the emotional needs of their children are addressed and prioritized.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think you said it exactly. A good family to the outside world, right? In perception, the perception of a good family, right? But digging deeper, right? They were not seeing to his emotional needs.
Right. So, what he needed wasn't important. How they appeared was important.
That pretty well sums it up. Yeah, that's very accurate.
And it's not even like I know them, so don't even.
Yeah, no.
But that's common.
It really was. Their perception, their appearance was more important than what each of the family members actually needed. So, yeah, very,
Where did his
very
family come down in your relationship with him?
Well, you mean like when we split up?
Not even that. Did you ever seek help from them?
No, absolutely not. His parents both passed away before we were divorced. But no, I mean, it wasn't the type of relationship where I would have ever gone to them and said, hey, something's up with your son. They wouldn't have believed me. And that's just not something that they would, that wasn't on the table for discussion. Problems, you don't talk about problems in that family.
Well,
so
where do you think he learned his lack of accountability from,
Exactly. It really was we don't discuss things. We, if there's any issues, we don't talk about it. So yeah, no lack of, no accountability whatsoever.
Infuriating.
It is. And then you see how you can then create these personality disorders in your children through this neglect, and you kind of see how it all comes together.
And to know that his life could have been so different, and your life with him could have been so different, and your children's lives could have been so different, and then their children's lives could have, at some point, someone needs to break the cycle.
That's right.
And that is one of the hardest things to do.
It is. You hear about generational trauma, and it's a real thing, and somebody does have to step in and break that cycle. And since both of my kids were out of high school when I got divorced, so that part was kind of nice in that they're both adults now. And I can have these discussions with them. It's not like they're 5 and 6 years old. And so we have had discussions about red flags and things that weren't okay. And I think that's important to break that cycle. We've got to call it for what it is and say, this behavior wasn't okay. He's your dad. You have a relationship with him. That's great. But realize that the way he acts is not okay. So it's, it's some hard discussion to have, but I think it's necessary to, like you say, break that cycle.
Mm-hmm. What are people going to find at your website, which is bridemaid.com?
No, it's Mia. It's
It's
Mia J. Hanks.
MiaJHanks.com.
.com. Yeah.
And the book is Bridemaid, a memoir. What else are they going to find at your website?
I have right now, it's still kind of a work in progress, but there's a link to order my book.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few quotes from my book on there. I also have a list of narcissistic traits where you can learn a little bit about narcissism. And so there's a couple of different lists, I think. One, the effects of narcissism. So there are a few things to click on, and then ultimately there will be a blog. I plan to start putting out a blog about once a week.
How are you doing now?
I'm great. I'm great. I feel like I've done a lot of healing. It has taken some time. I've really had to find myself again. With being with a narcissist for so long, you do lose yourself. You are so hyper focused on them and not triggering them, and so it's been an interesting journey, figuring life out again and figuring out who I am and what I want to do.
So what does the future look like for Mia J. Hanks?
I'm still figuring it out. Yeah, I'm trying to promote my book a little bit, do some podcasting, working on this website. So yeah, I'm not sure yet. I'm still in the planning stages. It's really crazy. Waking up after a divorce like this and realizing I have complete freedom. After being so micromanaged and so controlled for so long, and then you wake up one morning and think, I can literally decide how I'm going to spend today. I can make all my decisions myself. So it's overwhelming, but it's exciting too. So that's kind of where I am. I'm still kind of in awe that I can make my own decisions every day. So still figuring it out.
I think they call that peace.
Definitely.
Yeah. What is your Monty? So here at Belmont City Press, our mascot's name is Monty. And for us, he's that beacon of all things inspirational or lessons learned. So what is sort of a mantra or a phrase or something you can share with our audience that has sort of, you've kept close to you that has inspired you to keep moving forward?
I think it would be just a short little sentence of, you are not stuck. I think people in abusive relationships, a lot of times they don't get out because they think they're stuck. They don't see a path forward. So I think the message I want to convey is that you absolutely are not stuck. There is a way out. There are resources. There is help. And you don't have to live in an abusive home.
All right. So if we could take a moment and just try and get to know the Mia behind the Mia. And I will do our rapid fire where I'll give you two choices.
Okay.
And you can decide which one is yours and which one is not you. Let's see here. Texting or calling?
Texting.
Yeah, I know. There are people who still make phone calls. It's weird.
It's weird.
Apple or Android?
Apple for sure.
Okay, well, I don't know if that's true. Comedy or drama?
Drama.
Ice cream or cake?
Cake.
Rain or sunshine?
Sunshine.
City or countryside?
I like them both. I can't pick.
All right. Singing or dancing?
Singing.
Hot or cold?
Probably hot.
Really?
Yeah.
Like you like the heat?
Kind of.
It's so funny. Up until a few years ago, I think I was like cold. I'll be cold all the time. And then I have a very small window. It's between 62 and 68. Anything below 62 is too cold. Anything above 68 is too hot. So I don't know where that is that I need to live, but
That's
it must
a small window.
It is. It's a very small window. But I know who I am. All right. We have our guest to guest question. So the guest before you left behind a question for you to answer. So are you ready for your guest to guest question?
I am.
All right. Can you share a story about a moment that changed your perspective on life?
Yes. I'm not sure if it's a specific story, like a specific event,
Mm-hmm.
but more just kind of a generalization. So what changed my perspective? That's the question.
Yeah, what changed your
Okay.
perspective, in your life or on your life? Was there a moment in time
Yeah.
where you had a shift? And it sounds like if anyone did, you might have.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say that after I went through my divorce, and it was a very high conflict divorce with a lot of drama, um, definitely my perspective on a lot of things changed, but mainly just learning, figuring out what is actually important. And I realized I gave up a lot financially when I divorced my husband,
Mm-hmm.
a lot. And I just realized that, we had a very comfortable lifestyle. And while, yeah, it's important, um, family, friends, your relationships are way, way, way more important than where you live, what you drive. And it's not that I thought those things were the end all back then, but I'm realizing now that it's really the things that are really important are your relationships,
People over
people.
property. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So miajhanks.com, we will put the link in the show notes. What is your final thought for our listeners?
My final thought would be if you are in if you are in a marriage, if you are in a relationship that is, and you think something is off, if it doesn't feel right, it probably is not right. And you really need to do some, do some work and look into it. I read a quote not long ago that said, if you find yourself Googling someone's behavior in order to understand them, that's probably the biggest red flag you need.
I
So
can see
that would
that.
be something I would want to leave with the listeners.
I can see that. Well, Mia, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your journey, your story with us today. I appreciate your time. It's extremely valuable, and I hope I honored that here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. To our listeners, if you have a story to share, visit tellasastorypodcast.com. If you're an aspiring author, a seasoned business owner, or looking to elevate your personal brand, visit belmontcitypress.com for expert advice on writing your own success story. Trust the next chapter because you are the author. Now, tell us a story.